I have some very shocking news to share with you. Toyota is giving us yet another flavor of crossover. Now on its face, it doesn't really sound earth-shattering. However, this flavor ushers in two large changes. Okay, right from the get-go, it's still a Highlander, but the first big change is the size, the dimensions here. But what does that exactly mean? Rather than me giving you bullets and numbers, we'll talk about other vehicles that you've already seen on the road to give you an idea of the size here. So if you take a regular Highlander as like the standard use case, and that in itself is close to the size of a Ford Explorer, this is 6 inches longer. But the obvious question is, where do those 6 inches come up? Is it added to the wheelbase, or is it just the overall length, or is it somewhere in between? In reality, it's 4 inches extra in the wheelbase, meaning that's where you package the people and dogs, but the overall length is 6 inches. Now that leaves us 2 extra inches that they hang off the ass end of the vehicle. Why do they do this? To package real-sized people. In other words, not pint-sized children in the third row seat. Then there's the concept of how does this stack up to other vehicles that are not in the same segment? So not a Highlander, not an Explorer. Well, this compared against, say, a Chevy Tahoe, it's 9 inches shorter, and then it's still 6 inches longer than a regular Highlander. So think of this as like the Goldilocks in size in larger crossovers. Now we need to press on to the other big change here, and that resides underneath the hood. Usually not a big talking point in vehicles like this, because frankly, the kind of people that buy these things, they're just excited that it starts and is reliable. But there's really 3 things going on here. There's 2 powertrains we've seen in other Highlanders, the 2.4 turbo and then the 2.5 hybrid synergy drive system. Now Kumo will throw up on the screen some of the output figures for the current Highlander, meaning the one that is 6 inches shorter than this. From what I'm told by the engineers of this vehicle, the output figures are gonna change because of the size and the mass of this vehicle, and no, they haven't shared the weight. Now, while you guys look at that, we have to focus on the real change here, and that is the hybrid max system. We've seen this in the Crown, and in itself, it came from the Toyota Tundra, the basic technology of putting an integrated starter generator motor between the engine and transmission. Now here they start with a 2.4 turbo gas engine, which is the base engine in this vehicle as well as in the Highlander. So for the avoidance of doubt, this has a real geared transmission. Now it is on offer an all-wheel drive. Now the all-wheel drive with this Max system, like in the Crown, it's an electric all-wheel drive system in the back. Now there's 3 different grades here, like Toyota always does. There's the XLE, there's the Limited, there's the Platinum. Now one cannot have the Max system in the most basic XLE, and then there's the whole discussion of towing. After all, it is a large baby buggy, so I would assume someone would want to tow things like a boat or toys. This one, as well as the Turbo, has the highest towing at 5,000 pounds. The hybrid is only 3,500 pounds. Then there's the business of efficiency. Toyota hasn't shared the whole fuel efficiency with me, but they have said that the estimate for the hybrid, meaning not this hybrid, the regular hybrid with a 2.54 no turbo, is 34 combined. Then there are 2 other items that fall under the heading of performance for this. Obviously not a performance vehicle. The engine management system, there are 3 modes. Then the all-wheel drive system, for all-wheel drive as well as the hybrid max models, there are 3 different modes. Can't really talk to those until we drive the vehicle, and I'm told we're driving it sometime in May in a very unique area. Now we have to focus on the business of what these vehicles are, and that would be the interior. And here, no real surprises in design and UX, which is to say a good thing. We've seen this general theme from other Toyotas, especially with a 12.3-inch screen. Now we're sitting in the middle model. This is the Limited, so it has the larger screen. There is a smaller screen on offer for the XLE, but the big thing to point out here is the UX and the tactile feel. Like for example, notice you have knobs and toggle switches and hard buttons to control very high-use items like like the HVAC. Everything else is the new Toyota UX that we've seen now in the Tundra, the NX, as well as other new Toyotas like the Crown. We've talked more about that in other episodes. Now, in terms of tactile feel, I don't really want to judge this one because this is a very early pre-production prototype, but there are some unique bits to point out. Like, notice the color. There are 3 different colors inside on offer. There's, of course, a black, which the other one was. That's why I wanted to switch to this one, the white car, which is terrible to shoot from the outside. But in the inside, this one has what's called portobello. Now, I'm not a big mushroom fan, but when I see them, they're gray. But this is more of like a brown interior, which I have to say works wonders for a very large interior vehicle. Now, this one has the leather. However, in the Platinum, the fancy one, there's 2 different trims. Basically, there's the leather as well as ultra suede here, which brings us to the obvious question. What are some of the bits that change when one goes from, say, a limited to a Platinum? What makes it more fancy? Well, for example, up here, it's a digital rear view camera instead of a regular mirror, head-up display. And then the second row, the captain's chairs, those change from heated to heated and cool. Now, while we're talking about the rear of the vehicle, the part I am not looking forward to. Now, if I'm being honest, this is the point of the Grand Highlander, to make this area more usable, meaning for adults, not for children. So I set this seat up as to where I would be sitting, and I'm 6 foot tall, and believe it or not, I have enough room. Why is that? Because there's 6 inches extra of foot room, leg room in the 3rd row back here. And then while we're back here, it's, I don't want to say fancy, but usable. There's 2 huge cup holders back here, as well as USB-C on both sides. Then while we're talking about practicality, remember we talked about 6 extra inches with 2 of them being towards the ass end of the vehicle? Well, that translates to a lot more functionality back here. So with the seats down, it adds 13 extra cubic feet of storage. With the seats up, it adds 4 extra cubic feet of storage. Okay, so putting it all together, what does this mean? Why is this important? Well, there's the dimensions. That's all fine and good for practicality. But then there's the powertrain here. If you remember, when we drove the Crown as well as the RX 500 with this same powertrain, it transformed the driving experience. Not that it's super sporty, it's just one cohesive unit. Now, we can't talk about driving until we actually drive this thing. As I said, sometime in May, you and I are gonna drive it. But overall, that brings us to the wish list. And here, what am I asking for? Well, obviously, there's gonna be the pricing. We already know what the pricing of a Highlander is now, and it ain't cheap. And this one, I would argue, is somewhere gonna be between a very fancy Highlander now and probably a well-equipped Tahoe. I'm saying, please, oh please, oh please, don't get anywhere near 70,000 US, because that's where we get to a bridge too far, and people would consider a Tahoe, even though the fuel economy wouldn't be as good in that. Then color choices. You saw the blue, and then there's this terrible white. How about something that's a little bit more interesting, because this is a little bit more interesting of a vehicle, and frankly, the kind of people that buy these vehicles, style is a big point. But I am just one man, and this is the point of the episode where I turn this around to you to opine in the comments below, or via our social media, MotoMan TV, all one word, MotoMan TV, all one word, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And with that, if you got value out of this episode, I would greatly appreciate you clicking subscribe, notifications, and sharing these episodes with your friends on all your socials. Until I see you in the next episode, bis später.